How do you want me to intro you? Just from a title, or you just want to
So
say
yeah,
like, because
usually
I'll have you do your like own intro, but you want me to say Elliott with MM3, or
you can say
what's
Elliot
the?
MM3, and then I can and intro me as like Elliot
Yep,
from Amethyst and MM3 and all that stuff.
sweet. Okay, that sounds good to me. Let's rock and roll. I have to have two things recording just so that backup on backup on backup. All right,
The
there we go.
space looks great.
Oh, it's epic. I mean, it is. They did a great job. Yeah, and you
Mhm.
guys, I mean, like on the screen and stuff, your art looks really, really clean. Like, oh, and the one I minted, yesterday I minted one myself, or the day before. Yeah, so I when you guys minted, and I got the reveal yesterday, and I got a real. I mean, the art is the one I got was really clean, super,
Okay,
super
nice, nice.
stoked. Yeah, so I was like, I got one for the collection. Now I got one for my own personal one now. So we should be good. So we'll
Go ahead.
mention art here. It's like, all right, 2, 1. And I'll do the intro. Like I'll do my podcast intro afterwards, so you don't have to we have to worry about that. So we'll just go straight into it.
Okay, cool.
All right, friends. So now we are, of course, live in beautiful Columbus, Ohio, and here at the event, there are some great projects that are on display, and one of them happens to be MM3, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that project. And I got Elliott from MM3. So Elliott, thanks so much for joining me. I'm here live in the space. Let the audience know a little bit about who you are and about MM3, and then we'll just get into the interview.
Hey, yeah. So I'm Elliot. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Amethyst. Amethyst is Web3 brand equity and IP development company, and our latest project is MM3. MM3 is an NFT project. It's 6,226 avatars that is inspired by Marilyn Monroe and backed by her estate.
All right, so there's a couple of things I want to get into that. So you mentioned, about the agency itself. Talk to me. So, I think Web3 agencies, there's lots of names or things that kind of put in there. Lots of projects work with different people. How do you guys like? What kind of projects or what kind of work kind of you cover with some of the projects that you guys have worked with?
Yeah, so we actually started. We're actually our main goal is to actually create virtual avatars, virtual idols for the metaverse. And our first project was we partnered with Marilyn's estate and we recreated her digitally for the first time through CGI. And then we dressed her in like luxury fashion and we put her on the cover of a magazine. And then these were sold as NFTs. So this was our first iteration working with a large scale IP, but we kind of wanted to show like how you kind of how the progression of taking a Web2 IP, native IP, and putting in Web3. So we came up with MM3, which is inspired by Marilyn Monroe, but it's technically a Web3 native completely IP. And this is kind of how we show this progression of what you can do in terms of taking native Web2 native IP or creating Web3.
Well, I mean, I think this is it's a whole evolution, right? Because I think for a lot of people, when they assume metaverse avatar, they're not assuming or understanding, is that an NFT or where does an NFT fall in there? But even going as far back as, like the brand and, IP around Marilyn Monroe, not to mention how that kind of falls into an NFT and then where that plays into the metaverse. How do you guys look at that NFT, like that role? Because, we'll talk a little bit about MM3 and just the art, and it definitely stands out as art that is much more than just a photo placeholder on the front of a crypto token. Talk to me a little bit about like that kind of connection point on how you guys are thinking about NFTs to really symbolize and represent the avatars that will live in the metaverse.
Yeah, so our idea is that we want these avatars, these virtual avatars, to grow from communities, some existing NFT communities, and this is why we created our own native community, was to build an own avatar based off that community. And I think, our idea is that you have competing avatars in the metaverse, like as if it's like American Idol or something like this. In Asia, virtual humans, virtual idols is like this multi-billion-dollar industry, and it hasn't really kind of been explored yet in the West. And I think with the expansion of Web3 in the metaverse, it's a great opportunity for people to kind of explore this not only these virtual avatars, but also this gamification element of NFTs, and not just be, there's so much more that we haven't explored yet. We're so early in the space, and there's so much to learn and to grow. And this is definitely something that we believe is kind of the future.
So yeah, I mean, I think the future and the present, right? Like, which is, I think, part of
Right.
the story that's being told there. And I think part of it, I'm curious just from like, the art creation and the story that the NFT art represents, right? You mentioned, we have avatar, modular, component of that. How did connecting the dots between the IP, the traditional Web2 IP, what the NFT was going to symbolize, and then how that was going to go into the, metaverse? How did that art kind of come together?
Yeah, I mean, for MM3, it was a Marilyn Monroe inspired project, and we wanted, these 6,000 avatars to kind of represent everything that she stood for and everything she believed in. And that's why you see like such a diverse group of women. It's all about inclusion and things that are kind of hot topics at the moment. And this was super important for us, as our team is very diverse for years now. And it was really important to grow a community that was native, in the space, and also something that could grow into something much bigger.
So I think the idea of being inspired by Marilyn Monroe, there I think probably lots of places you can go with such a iconic kind of brand and impression that people have, and I think there's often the assumption that the kids are playing in crypto and NFTs, and Marilyn Monroe, although iconic across every generation, there's definitely kind of how that kind of represents differently. How did you guys kind of take into account, like when you're thinking about like how that represents and even how the avatar is going to look? How do you take into account like kind of the generations that kind of have a different kind of feel, or how Marilyn Monroe kind of shows up in that, for each one of them?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working now, because our first project, I've been working with the estate for about 10, almost more than a year now, from our first project. And it's amazing. I had no idea when I first started that like the fan base that Marilyn kind of comes with. And I'm not a representative of the estate, so I can't speak directly of it, but I can only speak from my own experience of working now alongside the estate and on projects with them, that her fan base is so diverse, and meaning like everybody, the level of the way people care about her as a person, and what she symbolizes, carries such weight, that you also have to think about all of these things that when you're creating something, because you can't just make something and think that everything is going to be accepted by everybody, because you're talking about an IP that's so large on a scale that is probably one of the biggest and most well-known famous person of all time.
So, and you mentioned, modular, right? And I think when people have a visual, when someone, I think, even those that are listening right now, that when they think about an avatar, I think there's an assumption, everyone kind of thinks of an avatar a little bit differently. When everyone thinks of an NFT, the more than likely they're probably thinking of some kind of ape or some kind of punk that they have exposure to. What is like modular NFT, or even the modular kind of represent for you guys, and how are you kind of approaching that, in this project?
Yeah, I think, two ways. We're super excited, obviously, because of, the background of the project, but we're using a new protocol called EIP 3664, which enables you to have a modular NFT that remains on chain, which is, people have done modular projects before, but it's always been off chain. So this is definitely something, this EIP comes from actually a gaming background. And the way we see it is, it's two ways. First of all, it's an endless roadmap, because we can create endless amounts of wearables for these avatars on a never-ending, infinite number. But also, if you think about it from a financial standpoint, there's two types of people. There's the people who are interested in NFTs for the art and kind of this gamification element, and you think about it like a Barbie, for say, like being able to dress it. But then if you go on the other side and you think about from a financial standpoint, if you think about it like very basically as a stock split, when you buy an NFT, you technically get 6. So, you can sell, trade, exchange, and the value also of your NFT when other collections come out, other wearables come up, is going to go up and down depending on what your avatar is wearing. So there's so many different levels of, ways that this project can expand, that we think it's, it's for the gamers, but it's also for the people that are more interested in the financial side.
I think it's such an important component of this, right? Because it is much more than just playing into one side, right? When if a project is like gamer only focused, I'm one of those rare techies that happens not to be a big gamer. And one of the things that you mentioned, as far as a new protocol, right? So working with an iconic brand, having like that connection in the metaverse with the avatar, but also working with another protocol. I think there's often an assumption like, oh well, that means that NFT project is either complicated or complex with all the different pieces. Talk to me a little bit about that protocol and kind of how that kind of represents for those that might be a collector or those that are looking at that as like maybe a step for what they could even represent.
Yeah, I mean, the software is pretty easy, like it just enables, your avatar to be completely modular, and you can literally, from once you mint, we have a separate site. It's like called a backpack, and you can basically just add and remove each element. And also like an OpenSea, we'll drop collections on our own site and be able to mint like from different brands. But then on OpenSea and secondary, you can technically just buy, if you want to buy a new necklace, you buy a new necklace, and then you literally is added to your backpack through your wallet, and you can just interchange from our site on the backpack. So I think it adds it's super interesting the way, because you're targeting so many different people. You're targeting like the gamers, you're targeting like the people that see it as a financial gain, and then you're also targeting like these Marilyn fans, and also like this fashion crew that's also super new interesting add to Web3 is like the fashion crown. So I think it's kind of for everybody, and that's kind of the ethos of the project from the beginning. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said and done.
So, I think one of the things too, when people think about modular, I think they often assume that what you're minting originally is not like a complete body of work. And, we minted, this project for part of our Mint 365 collection, which, excited to have it as part of our collection. But, it is a full on, avatar with some really amazing work. Talk to me a little bit about, so, in that process, because, a lot of this comes down to education of the NFT holder. You mentioned, there's mint drops. Is the full collection out now? How is the collection being rolled out? And then let's say someone buys one on secondary market. What does kind of that look like for them, kind of embracing that modular component?
Yeah, so we designed like the base level that we're releasing now. So we just did a mint for allow list, and so this is the base level components that we designed ourselves. And then we have a lot of partnerships in the roadmap for like different designers, different artists who are going to drop their own collections of wearables or components. And so for right now, everybody we haven't renounced any of those. We're kind of holding it tight to our chest, or of these drops. But there's definitely some really cool stuff that's going to come up, and partnerships that we have in the roadmap. And so whatever you have now is you can still trade, like whatever, if you were able to obtain from this last mint, you can still trade, and we still have a component site on OpenSea. And you can still buy different things and interchange what's available now, but there's definitely going to be a lot more that you'll be able to play with in the future.
I love that, because I think, the entry point for brands, when they're thinking about getting in this space, I think it's often assumed that you have to build your own audience, build your own Discord, build your own NFT project. I think it's unfortunate that that's where brands look at the only entry point in this space, right? I love the idea, a watch manufacturer. I'm a hat guy. Literally, I have hundreds of hats. The idea that a company like New Era could come in and partner and have a modular hat that could be, dropped as an NFT, those owners of the project. So, like total avatars in the collection, what is the numbers? What does that look like? And then how are you thinking? Is there going to be like, I mean, you mentioned endless possibilities. How do you look at like, the total number of, accessories? How do you guys kind of factor all of that into the discussion?
Yeah, so there's 6,226 avatars, which is the year she died and the year she was born. So, we thought about that. So the number of avatars will never change. This will always be 6,226. The number of kind of attributes or additional wearables is technically, I can't put a number on it because it's kind of limitless. It could go on for infinite. It depends on how the community maybe the community at one time wants to say, okay, enough is enough. But I think everybody, if it's been happening in Web 2 for the past few years, like collaborations and wearables, and this is kind of the same thing. We're just onboarding, and it's a great entry point for also Web2 brands and people to jump into Web3, because you already have an existing community. It's a great IP, and it's a great way to kind of sell also your collection. And as we see, fashion in Web3 and in the metaverse kind of explode at the moment, this is a great opportunity for brands to hop in. And this is something that Amethyst, that we're really, really strong, it's a strong belief, is, bridging the gap between Web2, Web3. If you're in Web3 now, you're still a super early adopter, but educating more people is kind of the goal.
I love that. Of course, that's what we're doing here at the podcast.
Right.
And you're even working like at activation here, experience. For those that are listening, I'm sitting on High Street here in Columbus, Ohio, at an activation, and it's an in-person activation. I went through it, and it's pretty amazing. I tell you, just for me walking the space, and you can actually put on a headset and go into what it looks like a mining room for mining crypto, and so one of the other pieces that you mentioned about, the buying and selling, or even the financial component. How does that work from like a rarity perspective on someone having different, components? And then how does that work when someone sell? If I add, 4 or 5, let's just say, components to my avatar that I minted, and then I go to sell that, do all of those go with it? How do you guys how does that all work with the protocol?
Yeah, so when you sell your NFT, you have to sell it as a complete set. So the next person that buys it has a complete set. You can't sell it as just like the base. And we haven't. There is a rarity to each item, but we haven't announced yet with the rarity. We're going to wait until public mint, because I don't think it's fair to do it until then. But there has been every component has been scaled to a rarity level. And I think that also will definitely entice people to kind of interchange and in the attributes, and kind of play with it more from a financial standpoint, when they learn that, okay, if I have this, obviously if I have a very well-known brand who's going to be doing accessories or clothing, this is going to add value to my NFT and increase, the value of it.
Now, you mentioned, avatars and metaverse. I think anytime we mention the two of them, there's often the discussion of which metaverse, or how can that avatar be used in the metaverses that are available today. So how does that work as far as those that might be minting one during the public mint? Is it multiple metaverses they can play, and how does that work as far as kind of the metaverse representation of the NFT?
Yeah, so Amethyst is building its own a metaverse called AFAN, and this is basically just going to be for the idol competitions and the idol shows. But we do want it for it to be multiverse. We don't want it to be just limited to one metaverse, or we want people to be able to take their avatars into different spaces. I think this is kind of the ethos of Web3. Like, we don't want to just separate. We don't want to become just one place where your avatar can only live. This is the whole purpose of what we're doing here in Web3, is creating this space for everybody and inclusion. And it's super important for us for that too.
Well, I love hearing that, because my podcast audience knows back in December, I decided to invest heavily in an avatar that unfortunately was stuck into one metaverse, and unfortunately, said metaverse is no longer operating at a scale. And I will say, I was turned off by the avatar concept because of that one experience I had, and then thankfully, I've picked up a couple since that I love having that kind of universal component. You mentioned the idol competition side, right? So, from a utility, first of all, it's with the Marilyn Monroe, ethos, like the idea that you have modular, you can add, different components on there. Talk to me a little bit about like that, the idol type piece of this. And then also, I'm guessing, the backpack concept on the website, is that something native that you guys created for this project, or is that part of the protocol? How did that all come together?
So for the backpack, we created it ourselves. That, we wanted a place where everybody could kind of, like your closet, for example, like where all your clothing accessories live. I think this was super important, because I think over time you're going to amass quite a collection, or that's kind of the idea. So this is something we created. And then for the metaverse and the idols, I mean, you know, the way we see it is like we're trying to recreate like the Web3 version of influencers and celebrities, you know, because you can't take an existing Web2 IP and kind of just create it in a digital Web3 version, because, you know, that person, if you pick a random celebrity and you say, okay, I'm going to create a digital avatar of this person, like the IP rights get very complicated, and this person is never going to agree to do X, Y, and Z. If the community, if a DAO is deciding on what's going to happen to this person can always turn around and say, hey, I don't want to do that because it's not native Web3 and it's owned by a Web2 person. Whereas if you create a Web3 native IP virtual avatar, virtual human, you know, it's fully controllable by the community. And this is kind of what we're doing here now in Web3. And this is how we see it playing out. You know, if you have brand collaborations that want to partner with this avatar, then it's easy for general consensus from the community to decide, okay, I want to take this deal, I don't want to take this deal. You know, you can't have somebody who is an existing IP and that has, you know, is a human, and you can always turn around and say, no, that's not for me.
I think it's such an important component of this whole conversation, right? I think that we have to look at this from, you know, it's easy to say like a DAO can operate and make all the decisions, but there are decisions that impact, you know, all aspects of project, of legacy, IP, and things that, you know, go for way back into many years into, you know, even the impact of other physical art projects of Marilyn Monroe, right? I think people kind of, you know, forget that. And when we talk physical, right, I'm curious, you know, we're here at 10 Space, and, you know, for those that are listening, this isn't, you know, paid promo, as everyone knows me, that, you know, I'm very transparent in the relationship. And I, you know, found out about the spotlight on crypto here in Columbus. We decided to come here and be able to record in person. You know, I'm all for kind of showing the offline side. And, you know, for your project, right, there's an assumption, you know, you're creating avatars with modular components with a bleeding edge protocol that plays into the metaverse. What the hell are you doing in a Columbus, Ohio, you know, IRL activation? Can you talk to me a little bit about like how that partnership or how that connection happened, and why do you value having kind of your NFT project even displayed in some, you know, in a physical gallery like we're at right now?
It's purely for us. It was all about education. You know, it was all about, you know, the user base technically in Web3 now is still quite minimal. And there's so much that can be learned, and there's so much knowledge to give. And I think everybody that's in Web3 now, and every user that's in the NFT space or crypto space, that, you know, all we want is just to kind of onboard more people. And I think any opportunity that you have to be part of something, you know, what they're doing at 10 Space, which is amazing, by educating the local community on crypto, on Web3, on NFTs, I think you know, the more we educate, the more we talk about it, you know, the more user base that we're going to get, the more beneficial it is for us.
Well, I mean, anytime anyone says that they're investing and letting, you know, people to use their, you know, their NFT, their art to help onboard and educate, I am all for. I think this space needs more projects and leaders that are leaning that way. You mentioned, you know, you have the allow list and the mint. Is there a date on the public mint? If there's people that are listening to this that want to, you know, have an opportunity to get an avatar, what are some of those dates, if you can share? And of course, for those that are listening, we'll have links and everything in the bio and the show notes here. But what does it look like kind of moving forward from here?
Yeah, so we did an OG mint and it did really well. We were just for friends and family and team, because, you know, obviously we wanted to do, you know, given market conditions, we wanted to do a full mint at one point, and, you know, it's just not realistic at this time. Anybody that's involved in NFTs, they know it's not a good time. But, you know, we wanted to do something, so we did this special allow list mint 1000, and this actually minted out in 2 hours, just over 2 hours. And so the next one will be another allow list mint. The date we haven't kind of announced yet. And then after that, we will do public. And so we still have just over 5,000 avatars, you know, still in the collection that haven't been minted. But the goal is to fully mint all of them. And we're staggering it. And I think this is just a strategy that for us at this time makes sense, given what's happening with the market, and announcements we will make on our social channels. Yeah.
I love that. And the beauty of this too is there is a secondary market, and we minted one for our collection, which we appreciate being included on that allow list to mint for our Mint 365. But I picked mine up, my own personally, spent with my own ETH on secondary there, pre-reveal, which was a lot of fun. And the whole reveal, I was super excited to be able to participate in that and kind of see that part. So for those that are interested in listening, there's definitely still a secondary market. And I'm with you. I made a couple predictions on back in January that I predicted this space goes to a choose your own adventure version of avatar creation and NFT creation. That was before I realized that protocols were being kind of developed in this space that where you guys are going. So as a futurist, I kind of like being proven right in certain places. I'm wrong majority of the time, but I like being proven right, and I love that what you're doing there. And I also like, I think the phase out approach makes a lot of sense, right? I think phasing out the mint, I was watching, on social as well as like through icy tools and things, for the collection, over the, couple hours. It didn't seem like 2 hours to me. It seemed like it went pretty darn fast on the mint out. I guess we'll kind of wrap a bow on this and just hear it from the standpoint of, you mentioned the endless possibilities, right? Brands that could partner and bring their modular, components to the holders. When you look at those that are jumping into this idea of avatar, metaverse, and connecting all of the dots, what would you say for those that are listening that are saying maybe this seems like it's too much for them to wrap their head around, or maybe they're still looking for okay, well, what does that mean for I'm a holder? How do you kind of present this whole where we're going with this for those that are still looking kind of for that aha?
Yeah, it's interesting, when you go to the Discord and Twitter, nobody really knows the back end of what's been happening for the last year and how I'm building this. And obviously everybody knows that the market's not great. So, there's a lot of apprehension, a lot of, I just tell people, you should do your own research a little bit on kind of the team. You should definitely dox the people and see, some of the past projects they've done, and don't just, it's as if you're investing normally in the stock market. You wouldn't just invest blindly. You do your own research, look at who the team is behind it and what they've done in the past, and see if they're actually capable of doing something. Before spending your money on something that then you go into Discord and you start saying oh, this is a scam project or something like this. Anybody that's working in Web3 and NFTs at the moment, it's not an easy time. It's not easy. It's just straight up it's not easy. And to drop an NFT project and also have something mint out within 1,000 units mint out in 2 hours, it's not easy. And trust me, it wasn't, it was very stressful. But you know what, I think we already kind of proved ourselves a little bit with our first project. We had, with our first Marilyn project, we had 1.3 billion impressions in the first 4 days.
That's billion. That's billion with a B, right? Billion with a B.
With a B, yeah. It's also very surprising. So we have a lot of experience. We come from an advertising background where we're not just trying to. We've thought about this extensively, and I know a lot of people want answers and they want to know what's going on. But you have to understand market conditions. A strategy is a strategy, and you kind of have to just go with it. And it's also okay, when you invest in something, I know you want to know what's going on, and definitely we're gonna kind of explain to people, what we have planned and a lot of projects that are coming up. But also I always say, just do your own research. See, is this team capable of executing something, and is it worth it? And then if you've done your research, then I think that's.
Well, I think doing your research is so important that I added a damn to it. So we say, do your own damn research here on the podcast. And I think for those that are listening too, part of it is research, right? I don't buy personally into every project that we're minting. And for those that are usually overly concerned about like what's happening next and where things are, and this is my own personal opinion, I believe they actually don't do enough research on the front end, because if you believe in the team, you trust in the vision, part of that is just coming on the ride. And I will tell every project that I advise that, your ability to roll with the punches, your ability to, communicate and, and kind of weave as this market kind of takes us on this roller coaster, that's the project that you want to get behind. The projects that are stuck in the mud, that are literally doing the same strategy they had a year ago, they're just implementing it in 2022. That's part of the problem. That's what got our market where we're at today. So, Elliott, thanks so much for jumping in. Appreciate you coming and sharing about the project. Love that you're investing in education. Here at 10 Space, the fact that people can literally come in off the streets. I mean, off the streets. And for those that are watching on YouTube, you can see over my shoulder. You can come in to the activation. You can see Marilyn Monroe photo over here on the wall. You can see on the digital display the the NFTs and the art. I can show off mine that I have on my mobile device, since we have one in the collection. I have one as well. But for those that are listening, of course, the show notes will include all the links for the project. Definitely check out the art, as always. Not financial advice, and do your own damn research. And of course, I'll share some links and some behind the scenes stuff from 10 Space. So, Elliott, thanks so much for the MM3 team. Thanks so much for joining us. And until tomorrow, my friends, make it a great day. Cheers.
Thanks so much.